Boop, 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 ba-doo. Hello, we should be live. It says live on here. It doesn't say live on this. Anybody's there in the chat, please let me know. There we go. Now it's come through. I'm muting myself for just. All right, just had to make sure the audio was coming through as well. Hello, everybody. Hey, Nate. Hey, Greg. Ben should be joining us shortly. I can give a short introduction of him, and I'll ask him to say more about himself when he gets here. Hello, Angel. Ben is a non-denominational pastor. If anyone doesn't know who he is the YouTube apologist as well behind Cleave to Antiquity, where, from what I've seen, he's addressing Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and Islam in various flavors. And puts a lot of great stuff out. So he should be on here soon. And today's topic is we're just going to talk about apologetics in general. Some of the goods, a lot of the bads, maybe a lot of the goods. Who knows where this conversation is going to go. But Ben and I know each other from way back in the day, actually. Greg, you might remember Ben. You were around. There he is.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. I was just introducing you. I mentioned you're a non-denominational pastor. You do YouTube apologetics. Add anything if I've missed one of Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, and Islam.
Yeah, those are the main three. I noticed that a lot of people don't do debates or anything with Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, at least. Well, so that's one of the reasons I created the channel, was to try to fill that gap there.
Yep. I'm excited to see it, and you do have an upcoming debate as well. I should have grabbed a link to that before this started, but I will be sure to put a link for his upcoming debate in the chat when this is all said and done, and I'll pin it in the comments.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. It'll be with Cameron Riker, the Roman Catholic apologist. So that'll be cool. It'll be on the canon of Scripture, 66 verses 73. So stay tuned for that.
I'm excited to see you win. And there are a few people here from SSBS. Greg might remember you. I remember you from way back in the day when we were first up and going. I don't even know if I was an admin yet before you left SSBS. That's how long it's been.
Yeah, it's been quite a while.
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know what SSBS is, that's a ministry where we do apologetics, sort of apologetics, but mainly pastoral care, helping people who have ecclesial anxiety over, if you're not in the right church, are you within salvation? So if that sounds like you, feel free to reach out. I'll also put that in the pinned comments. But I know today, unless there's something else you want to add, I know you're married. Do you guys have any kids?
Yeah, I have one.
One? Awesome. Boy or girl?
A girl.
Girl. Congratulations. Now she'll forever be daddy's little girl. That's how it goes. At least in my house, that's how it's been.
Yep, and we just found a little baby kitten, so that's nice.
Oh, perfect.
It was funny. My wife was trying to convince me to get this blind dog she saw on Facebook, and the dog is like, it's like the most. This is bad for me to say. It was like, pretty messed up looking dog. I'm like, babe, I do not want this dog. So I'm joking with her over the phone, and I'm like, I kind of half seriously pray. I'm like, Lord, I hope a good family finds or takes this nice dog in. I'd rather have a kitten. Literally the next day she finds a kitten in the middle of the road. So, now
maybe the Lord answered 2 prayers that day.
That's right. Yeah. Well, actually, because the dog did find a home the next day.
Hey, there we go. See, prayer has power, guys.
That's right.
But we're talking today about apologetics and not necessarily trying to delve into specific topics, though I'm sure specific ones will come up. But you recently put out a video shortly after Pope Francis passed, may he rest in peace, and addressing, people said some pretty nasty things once he died. And I'm just like, including on the first day, I'm like, he hasn't even been in the ground yet, and you're already making comments. It was pretty bad, but your video there really struck a chord with me on we really need to raise the state of modern apologetics above this. The bar's in the dirt. It's not even been lifted up for a lot of people, which is really sad. And that's kind of what we're talking about here today. So if you have anything you want to say up front before we kind of delve into specific ideas,
Yeah,
on that.
I think the apologetic scene right now on YouTube is pretty abysmal. It reminds me of like the early Discord days when it was really just like a bunch of sophistry and cutting people off and insulting each other. I want to elevate the level of discourse past that in two ways. One, on the Protestant side, I think we need to move past the kind of like there was a huge age back in the 90s and early 2000s where there was kind of like this boomer level apologetics where people would just make straw mans of Roman Catholicism, and it's like, look, this is idolatry, they're worshiping Mary, look at this, you know, and
Yep.
like completely casting aside any distinctions they have, um, and just kind of trying to narrow it down and build something up that's easy to knock down. I think that worked in the 90s and 2000s, even though it was a little bit dishonest, but it worked. People who didn't know any better were convinced by that. We're in the age of information now. We need to be bringing the receipts. We need to be bringing the church history receipts, the scriptural receipts, the philosophical receipts.
Yep.
So that's what I'm trying to do with the channel now. So that's one way that we need to elevate the level of discourse. The next way is we need to do it by making sure that when we do these debates, we're doing it in a godly manner. If we're claiming to be Christians and we are engaging in these types of debates, yes, we can be a little forceful. Yes, we can make sure that they don't run away from a specific topic. I'm not saying be a doormat because it doesn't work, but there's a way to be forceful without resorting to like an ad hominem attack or just outright slander or me just cutting you off every 2 seconds, So those are the two ways that I really want to try to push the level of discourse to the next level. So I've encouraged everyone that watches the channel, if you have an argument that you really like, take it from me. I don't care. You don't even need to give me credit. Literally just add it to your notes, whatever. It doesn't matter. And if you want to clip the channel, I'm never going to copyright strike anybody. This is all stuff that I'm doing for the sake of I want to see other people using these arguments and winning debates and elevating the level of discourse. That's the entire point.
Awesome. And if anyone hasn't seen the doobly-doo below, his channel is like right at the top. So go check out his stuff. He does a lot of good stuff. And I absolutely steal a lot of your arguments. But I know for me, there's just a lot on both sides. So everything I'm going to say today, I have seen people in every debate sphere do. It doesn't matter if they're Protestant or they're Methodist, Baptist, whatever, Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox. Everybody kind of does these things. And this is one, I'm actually going to start off with probably the most nuanced one, I think, because it's also one where people can honestly do this and not realize it. And it normally only becomes apparent this is happening, in my experience, when you confront someone on it. And that's when they failed to grasp the text that's in front of them and they're using it to make a point. So I don't have one in front of me. One I can think of off the top of my head is Shabir Ali and Anthony Rogers. Shabir Ali has done this in several debates where he quoted Daniel Wallace on the Greek of John 1:1 and made some kind of argument that, oh, this isn't talking about the word, Jesus being divine. And he claims Daniel Wallace supports his argument. Well, Anthony Rogers points out to him, actually, you're wrong. Here's what he's saying. And then he gets Daniel Wallace gets wind of it and puts out a video saying, yeah, Shabir Ali is wrong. He's misrepresenting me. First time you'd be like, okay, Shabir, this has been pointed out to you, drop this argument. But he keeps doing it in after debate. So now he's doing it intentionally. Mm-hmm. But there's other times, and I mean, I've done this, I'm sure everyone's done this, where you read something and then you just actually misunderstand it. And you genuinely failed to grasp what was being said until someone pointed out to you. And then you feel like an idiot afterwards, but you correct it and move on. I don't know if you've seen that a lot in your own debates, but I've seen that often.
Well, I think in any debate, fundamentally, it's two opposing worldviews clashing against each other. So oftentimes, even if there is some kind of logical mistake that they're making in their line of argumentation, sometimes that person's just got blinders on.
Yep.
Honestly can't see it, or they're using it as a gotcha and they don't really care if there is some kind of defeater out there for it, because maybe they think, oh, well, this is just a good line to use as like an opener or something, or it catches people off guard, or maybe it'll catch the people that don't know any better off guard. A common question that kind of gets tossed out a lot that's similar is like I don't want to go too much in this because I'll show my cards before the debate. But a common one is the canon problem, and you go in, you will have Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox present the canon problem to Protestants that have no idea what they're talking about, and it catches them off guard because they have no idea that there was. I don't want to show my cards, but at least in the Eastern Orthodox worldview, there is no infallibly defined canon list. So they're using this despite the deficiency within their own worldview, and they're only using it as a gotcha. Even if they've been shown this, they'll continue to use it as a way to like, oh, sola scriptura, like the straw man of sola scriptura. You can't accept any tradition whatsoever. Yeah, that's not what that means. Like praying with your eyes closed is tradition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, we don't do any of those traditions of men. You know, it's like, okay, well, do you pray like this?
Yeah.
But they'll boil it down to the most straw man version of Protestantism. And the sad thing is, it works on the people who have done zero amount of research into these areas. The same way that in the 90s and 2000s, the boomer level Protestant apologetics worked on the older Roman Catholics. I didn't know we were actually worshiping Mary, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that'd be a piece of advice to you in the audience. And this is something we noticed a lot in SSBS. And this goes across boundaries, where you come out of something and you're like, oh, I was raised my whole life in it, therefore I know everything I need to know. And then if something gets brought up, it's like, oh, and now this applies to everyone else who falls into my category, regardless of like distinctions. And I mean, you know, of course, there are people who play into that in the apologetics world. They're like, yeah, of course, all Protestants do this, and then they're not acknowledging distinctions. But hopefully people are moving away from that. But I've seen that in the Roman Catholic sphere too. You know, like people who come out of South American Roman Catholicism, which does have a lot of syncretism going on, but that is not all of Roman Catholicism. You know, if you come up to America, it's not like South America. If you go to England or Rome, it's not like South America. They are different. And people just kind of assume they're all the same. I don't know if you've experienced a lot of them, but
you know what I like? I like in the comments when someone's like, I'm a Protestant, but I say this is a bad argument because of 1, 2, 3. Come to find out, like 10 comments down, they're like an Orthodox inquirer or catechumen. It's like, so you're a liar, basically.
Yeah.
You know why? It seems like, especially in that realm, dealing with, I mean, because there's a huge difference between Orthodox Christians in real life and the Orthodox Christians online. But dealing with online, like ortho bro types, is oftentimes like dealing with a Muslim. You know what I mean? It's like doing the like deception tactic, like, oh, you know, I am a Christian and I say I don't believe the Trinity is true or whatever, you know, something crazy. Like, man. Okay, yeah, you're an inquirer, man, or you're a catechumen.
Yeah, I've met some wild ones. I know that the Ortho Bros would never do this, but there should be like a time limit placed on you before you can start making comments or posting videos about your tradition once you transfer. There needs to be a time limit.
Yeah, exactly. It's the Protestant 2 seconds after he converts to Roman Catholicism because he got hit with the canon conundrum. Now he wants to use it on everyone else.
Josh, I see your question. I'll try and save some time at the end for questions. I know I'm on a time limit. I have a wedding to go to. That's why I'm dressed a little nicer than you might see me in some of my other videos. But we will get through all of these. My next point, if I can read my own handwriting, I think we've already talked on this enough, is like caricature attacks. Straw manning is a common problem in debates. And as you talked about, it was super common in the 90s, 2000s, but we see it all the time, even still today. From the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox side, it's like, oh, all Protestants, and it's like specifically attacking a specific flavor of evangelicalism. And it's not acknowledging that, one, not all are like that. And two, I have seen a lot of people who will just throw that out as a critique and then not actually back up why it's a problem. Yeah. Not that I agree or disagree with them, but like you still have to demonstrate why this is a problem. You can't just say it is and then keep going on.
Yeah. Don't mind drinking a knockoff diet soda.
You're good. I will drink my knockoff Dr. Pepper.
Nice.
As well, I'll attempt to drink it. No way their priests or bishops know they were posting videos or comments. That's true. I have met a lot of people who their priest didn't know what was going on. But that's a different comment for another time. Unless you have a comment you want to bring up there. The next thing I'm going to talk about is goalpost shifting. I'm sure you've plenty of experience with that one.
You know what? To be completely honest, though, with that particular subject, I feel like the people who debate that are constantly, like, a lot of people need a philosophy 101 course, because
Yes.
all things fallacies that are not fallacies are like, oh, that's a straw man. No, this is an actual critique, or I'm doing an internal critique. And people will use that as an intellectually lazy way to not engage with the actual discussion. There was one video that I made where you could tell people had not taken a philosophy 101 class. And it was like, in the comments, every ortho bro was leaving like, oh, that's a Tukokwe
Oh no.
I'm like, no, it's not. If the answer is, so this was the way it was framed. It was like, Eastern Orthodox will have a hard time using this argument by saying that you need an infallible canon list in order to operate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if it's pointed out that they currently operate without an infallible canon list, that satisfies both requirements of the discussion. It's one, the answer to the question is showing you how you're currently doing it and saying, look, that works. Why does it work? Right. But they're trying to reduce it down to something else. I think the issue is people don't. Well, I think honestly, a lot of it's probably just people being dishonest in the comments, which is why I tell them, hey, come and do a live debate with me when I do my live debate call-in streams. I feel like that's a lot more fruitful. I've had a couple of people actually take me up on that, and it's actually been really good discussions. But the vast majority of people would rather, I think, just kind of hide in posture. But I try to make sure that I don't over censor my comments. The only thing that I'll remove is if somebody's outright, I don't know, like blaspheming or like dropping like slurs and stuff. You know, I'll try to filter that down a bit. But I try to leave it as open as I can, so that way I can respond to them or invite them to do a live debate, because I think that's a lot more fruitful. As far as the like goalpost shifting, I think a lot of that, honestly, sometimes can just be subjective when you're in the middle of the debate, because people will kind of skirt around the main argument. And then you have to ask clarification questions and boil it down to get to where the real epistemic problem is. And they're like, oh, but you're asking too many probing questions, so you're shifting the goalposts. It's like, no, I'm probing to get down to the epistemic basis of why you have the claim that you're making right now. I don't know if you saw the Jay Dyer debate.
I did. Yeah.
So the initial claim, and I don't know if you saw at the very beginning of the debate, I had stated, and I made it very clear, this was my premise. This was premise one. It was that the canons of the ecumenical councils should be upheld. They can't be rejected in perpetuity, but they do have economia in the way that they apply the canons. So it doesn't need to be the legalistic, very strict, rigid, exactly how it says. For instance, if it has like 7 years as a prostrator, right, you can lessen that, or whatever the case. Or if there's something without historical or something that has historical context that no longer applies directly, you just take the principle over. And that was something that was stated at the very beginning of the debate, but it was pretended like I didn't say that. So economia was just explained like 500 million times. And when I boil it down to, well, this is what was stated at the very beginning. And I asked the question very directly right there at the end. I said, well, can you reject the canons in perpetuity? Yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I remember that.
Show me where that's documented, because that was point number one. So, and then there was no documentation given and I was removed. But I think that a lot of times in these types of debates, that's really the point that we need to drive home, is ask for the receipts, especially when you're debating Eastern Orthodox about anything in their theology. If they just say, oh, well, you don't understand it because it's your Protestant mindset, or whatever the case may be. It's just your worldview. It's like, okay, that's a cope. You're deflecting. Give me the receipts that I'm asking for. I presented ABC 123 citation. Where's your citation? It's like I've had other debates on the same topic in which I've engaged with an Eastern Orthodox, and I'll cite from the Rudder, which I don't know if you saw the video where I was going through some of the lines in the Rudder.
Yeah.
literally in the prologue to the book, it says this is secondary in authority only to the Holy Scriptures, right? And I've had some Eastern Orthodox say, "Oh, we don't use that at all. Like it's just hand waving."
I've experienced the same thing when I've tried to bring up the rudder every
Yeah.
single time.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
like,
we don't do.
okay,
It's like, okay,
all right, bud.
yeah. I've had say, well, that's only, which is ridiculous. That's only for priests and bishops to use. You can't view that with your Protestant eyes and tell me.
No.
Oh, my Protestant eyes have to for
I
Orthodox.
get that with the church fathers all the time. You can't read the church fathers with your Protestant eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I know goalpost shifting, like being the one, so it's very easy to fall into in the middle of something. I find, as you've been doing, like actually talking with someone makes it a lot easier when you're just in a text chat. At least with me personally, like it's easier to type faster than you're thinking or talking. And I already talk faster than I think. It makes it really bad in typing. But you know, I've seen it. One of the ones I see it the most often is like in the authority debate of like, oh, Protestants, whether it's Baptists, Lutherans, whatever, they're like, you have no actual authorities you can fall onto. And then I'll demonstrate, yeah, actually, we do have authorities you can fall onto. It's like, oh, well, they're not the same authority as like Rome has. And I'm like, that wasn't the initial discussion point at all.
Yeah.
That's a different discussion. I'm like, if you determined Rome is true, then yeah, that's your breaking point. But if you haven't determined Rome is true, this isn't something you can use to then settle a discussion, and you can't move the goalpost back that far.
Right.
But
I personally don't mind that in discussions, especially debates.
Yeah.
Debates typically, if it's like an informal thing, it doesn't really matter if you dive into different lines of reasoning within the same realm. I'll be like, but I will force them to say like, okay, but you admit that this is still an authority. So that's like, okay, win on point number one. I don't need to keep it super, super narrow. And maybe that's me just not being a master of rhetoric and owning libs or whatever, you know. I don't know. Hero, it's one thing, you know. But I think in a debate, nobody's ever going to sit there and just say, okay, you won, like in the middle of the debate. The way you know you won is if you get them to move on to the next topic and to concede the first topic you're talking about. It's like, okay, oh great, well there. So I've won that part. Now we're on debate number 2 at this point.
Yeah, I think, and you know, maybe it's because I'm not a rhetoric primus, but like I have seen a lot of debates where, and even just dialogues where it seems people put rhetoric above actually having the discussion, and it drives me up a wall at this point. I'm like, yes, rhetoric has a place, and rhetoric is a useful tool. We need to be able to use it, but at the same time, we shouldn't let that like run over good argumentation. But I know that's not how the debate world works, and that's something the debate world needs to change. But we start here at YouTube and then move into the debate world.
Well, if informal debates, typically, yes, there is a level of rhetoric to it. And sometimes the people who are like completely rhetoric focused, like say, like a Sam Shimon type or one of those type of debaters. Yeah. But if you do a timed debate, typically like timed responses, like, I don't know, let's say like I give me and you were to debate on, I don't know, whatever.
Confessions.
Give you 2 minutes, right? And then I take 2 minutes and I'll discuss my part. I think that cuts through a lot of the nonsense, but it's hard to do that on like a live call-in stream. That have to be a planned thing.
Yeah. There is a huge difference between timed and not, and that's why I'm happy to leave. I don't know how I do in timed debates. I haven't done a timed debate because, well, I'm not much of a debater, but it doesn't come through a lot, and some people are surprised. Sometimes I get heated really quickly, depending on what the topic is. So I don't want to debate things I get heated on really quickly, because I'm not like, what if I lose my cool in the middle of this? Then it's just going to be really bad. You got for everyone involved. But
first,
listen,
do it.
Yeah, I've built up patience on a lot of things, but I can't figure out why there are some things that just like cut through everything. Like I've had years, like I can sit through hours of the most mundane, mind-numbing, for some people, most frustrating things in a conversation. But then other things, it's like you just say it and I'm immediately losing my cool. I probably should talk to someone about that. But that's a personal thing I got to work on there.
Yeah,
Not completely sanctified yet.
Honest, that's most people, and why a lot of people stray away from debates. I think one of the things that God has really blessed me with was I was raised when I was very young in a household full of women, so my patience was constantly tested. So I'm a very patient man. I don't know if you could tell, but like in the J debate, it was like attack, but just cool as a cucumber.
Yep.
That's the level where we need to have emotional control when you're doing debates, because that's a tactic that a lot of people will use. Like, if you, like, I don't know, just give me a point and I'm just like, ha, like I can jump in and cut you off. If I really wanted to use that as a debate tactic, which I think is kind of, I would not personally use that tactic, because I think it's a little rough, and might not look good for me as a pastor to cut people off and I don't know, kind of cow them into submission, like, they're a battered wife or something. But I do see it as an effective tool for people to use if maybe they're a little more looser with their morals, if that makes sense. I don't want to insult them. I'm not trying to insult these people, but it is an effective debate tactic to cut them off and to rattle them. It's like if like I do jujitsu, if I really want to do really well, which I don't try to do this, but if I was in a competition, if I were to rattle a guy before the competition and he's just using all strength and he's not thinking about technical moves, I'm going to dominate the round. I'm going to submit him very fast, because if you use strength in something that's very technical, you are not going to do very well. In something that is very intellectual, like debate, what's the best way to get them from thinking in a logical and rational way? Well, shift their thinking into the emotional side of their brain, and then it's over from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that there is true training for debates. I'm probably banging my mic. I'm sorry to the audience if that's the case. It's happening every time I make that motion. But that if anyone is not super familiar with debates, I do recommend you learn debate tactics, and you can be on the lookout for these things, because that a lot of debates can really get lost in people using these debate tactics and the points just kind of getting lost under them. I've seen countless debates where people are like, oh, this person won because of the rhetoric they use and the tools they use. But then when I ask them about the actual arguments presented, they're like, oh, wait, yeah, the arguments didn't really go anywhere. And it's a shame. It's like debates are supposed to be about pursuing the truth, but they're also supposed to be about furthering discussions. So if you kind of fail to further the discussion at all, you kind of missed one of the points of a debate. But you have more experience with that. I don't know if you have anything that like constantly happens in debates that people never get to. But
I think debates are only useful up until a certain point. Yeah, it dominates the culture, right? So if you are, I don't know, if you're clip farming and you are doing these things where you're just trying to corner them and trap them in their words, but your argument really doesn't hold any intellectual weight, most of the people who are watching debates, I feel like, don't actually follow the discussion that's actually going on. So that can be abused. The thing that I really want to try to do with my channel is employ ethical rhetoric tools, right? So yes, you do need to have some kind of conversation control without doing it in an immoral way, but also do each of the debates by providing the receipts that back up my position. I'll never enter into a debate without having an epistemic foundation from which I'm arguing from. So, for instance, if I'm doing, I don't know, an immaculate conception debate with a Roman Catholic, and I'm saying, well, my premise is tied back to the epistemic foundation. The foundation would be the litany of citations within the first 3 centuries that affirm that Mary had sinful nature, original sin, was born in iniquity, all of those things, and that foundation of church fathers that have that view, as opposed to the absence of really any patristic witness within the first 3 centuries of the church stating otherwise. Until you get to about Ephraim, and then things get a little muddier from there, which really I would argue that Ephraim talks about pre-purification. But the epistemic foundation would be first 3 centuries, patristic witness 100% in favor for having original sin. Then the entire discussion is pointing back to that foundation, and I'm not getting lost in the discussion. It's like, okay, we're getting a little too far out here. Now you're talking 6th century. Now you're talking 7th. Now you're talking 8th. Now you're talking about documents that scholars date later, and maybe one scholar dates earlier, like Subtuum Presidium, right? Which, like, one scholar dates it in the 3rd century, one other guy copies that scholar, and 3 others date it for the 5th or 6th century. So it's like, okay, back to the foundation, back to the foundation. I think if we can learn to debate like that, rather than going in and saying, well, I have a general idea of why I think this is right, and I'm going to defend my general idea, because that's what a lot of Protestant apologists are doing, at least the new ones. They'll go into these debates and they're like, I have a general idea, but they don't have the receipts to back it up. You're in for a bad time. So I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm just rambling, but
it makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to anyone else, but if no one followed that, basically when you're showing up to a debate, make sure you have an actual foundation you're standing on to then debate from, so you know what you can always return back to. Because if you don't, well, it's really easy to get caught in a bunch of side points that start cutting away what lack of a foundation you have. We can get to that question later. The last thing I have, well, I actually have more. Last talking point before we get on to some of the other things is really like the timing of debates. This is something I've noticed, at least in like non-formal debate settings, is really bad. There is a right time and place to debate someone, and it's not when like evangelization is happening. I don't know if you've had to deal with that, but there are like more public Discord servers, and of course there's the recent incident with Cliff and his son and the Orthodox college student who showed up in the middle of their like outreach to students to try and convert them into Christianity, is like debating Orthodox Protestant talking points. I'm like, putting the content of their own squabble aside, like when someone's witnessing to someone who's not in the faith, that's probably not the best time, in my opinion, to show up and start trying to debate like the canon or something. It's like, this person needs Christ before they even get to discussing these points. So I'm not sure what the goal is of trying to show up and have this debate like right here, right now. I don't know if you've had any encounters with that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think to the Eastern Orthodox, though, from their perspective, they would say that if they were to convert to, I don't know, some kind of general Protestantism, they wouldn't believe they're saved anyway. So it probably doesn't bother them as much.
Yeah, depending on the Orthodox, yeah.
That's probably how they would justify it, because basically, if you're not aware, basically every single Christian group outside of the Eastern Orthodox are anathema from their view.
Yeah.
You'll have some modern Eastern Orthodox that will say, well, anathema just means you're not within the church, right? Anathema is basically just like an excommunication. That's not the case. If you actually look at the minutes of Nicaea 2, it says it's nothing less than complete separation from God. So if you're operating from that kind of a worldview, it's not a big deal to cut somebody off mid-evangelization to try to convert them to Eastern Orthodoxy, because debates are not about winning. This is going to sound bad, but it's not. This is the truth. Debates are not about winning the individual that you are discussing it with. It's for the people that are listening to be won over to that particular worldview. And I'll give you an example. I had a not recorded, obviously, but kind of like an informal debate discussion with my wife's now husband back when they were dating. And he was an atheist at the time. And so was, my wife's, not my wife, my sister's husband. Sorry, I misspoke. My sister's husband, who was the boyfriend at the time. And I was having a discussion with him. He was an atheist, and she was also an atheist. So it's my sister and her husband. I'm over at their house with my wife, and I'm talking to her husband about his atheism. And we go into tag, we go into the Kalam cosmological argument, and I'm going into various other kind of like atheist apologetics, like general atheist apologetics. And it didn't stick with him at first. because I don't know if you ever heard like the tag argument. Basically, it shows the atheist worldview is like untenable,
Yeah.
where you have no epistemic foundation from which to argue from. And it gets down to the point where I'm giving him historical evidence for the resurrection. I'm giving him historical evidence for Jesus Christ's existence, because he was one of the guys that was like, well, I don't even know if Jesus existed. So I give him that first. And then I give him the evidence for the resurrection. And he's like, yeah, but you can give me all this historical evidence, but how do I even know any of that's real? Maybe it was all a forgery or something. I'm like, okay, great. So we're boiling it down. We're boiling it down. Eventually it gets to the point where he's like, well, how do I even know I exist? We could just be in the Matrix. Like, I could watermelon's real or whatever. I'm like, that's my point. Your worldview doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So it gets down to that. And then my sister, overhearing that, me debating with my sister's then boyfriend, who's now her husband, she goes and in a month is baptized. She goes, she's like immediately was convinced by overhearing it. She wasn't the one I was having the discussion with. It was, her husband, but her overhearing that, it really impacted her. So sorry for the mix up in language.
Oh, you're good. That's an awesome story. That does. I will be actually doing a video on anathema. I don't know, maybe in like 2 weeks. I have a Chrysostom quote to share as well. So this goes well before Nicaea 2, because I have heard countless times, oh, you're just misreading Nicaea 2. All right. Well, here's one quote from John Chrysostom. This is on, I believe, Galatians 1:8. I'll put the citation in the actual chat. Now he would not have anathematized both himself and an angel if he had known the act to be without danger. And again, I am jealous of you with the jealousy of God, he says, for I have betrothed you to one husband, a chaste virgin, and fear lest at some time, as the serpent beguiled Eve by his wileness, so your thoughts should be corrupted from the singleness that is towards Christ. See, he both set down singleness and granted no allowance. For if there were no allowance, and there was no danger, and if there was no danger, Paul would not have feared, and Christ would not also have commanded that the tares should be burned up, if it were a thing indifferent to attend to this one or that one to another, or to all indiscriminately. And if no one understands that tare reference, that is a reference to when the tares are pulled from the wheat and then burned, aka hell. It's not a pretty spot to be.
Yeah. The issue with the anathemas isn't necessarily that anathemas exist. It's that they anathematize literally everybody who is not.
Yeah. I have heard that. I will just make this note, at least with the Russian Orthodox, and at least they're the more consistent ones on this. To one who would want to argue on that point, their liturgy does just anathematize people who don't believe in God. So you can't say, oh, it's just those within our church. If that were the case, they wouldn't be anathematizing people who've never accepted the Lord. But we could probably sit here for a while and talk about that one.
That's on this day of Orthodoxy.
Yeah. I do want to talk about people, not just Protestants, but also Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, really just, or maybe even expanded, if you know apologists you like in other spheres, like that we would both recommend, because I don't just want this to be here's what's wrong with Protestant apologetics. I want to also give people like a list of, hey, here's who I think does it well. None of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes at some time, but these are people who, on the whole, are doing a really good job. And I guess do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first? Okay.
Talking Protestants, or are we talking Roman Catholics as well?
Yeah. I have Protestants, Roman Catholics, and Eastern Orthodox on here, and feel free to expand it if you know someone from who does apologetics in other spheres that you would recommend people watching. Yeah,
I'm going to be completely honest. In the Protestant sphere, I don't know anyone other than Gavin Ortland that is currently doing it and doing it well with coherent and actually doing the debates. What you see a lot of times with the Protestants that actually know what they're talking about, they refuse to do the debates. I don't know why. They just refuse to do them. So that was one of the reasons I created the channel, because if you go throughout YouTube in the kind of debate sphere within Christianity, it's all Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics. So the only one that I could really recommend would be Gavin. All from the Protestant side. From the Roman Catholic side, I guess somebody who is pretty charitable. Trent Horn, I'd say, is pretty charitable. guy, Catholic_Christian. He's pretty charitable. From the Eastern Orthodox, that's a little tougher. I'm not quite. They all kind of in that same vein.
I have exactly one name, and it's not because I think he's like, I like him, but I certainly got plenty of things I would consider problems. Seraphim Hamilton, he's done a few debates. I would recommend him simply because, unlike a lot of Eastern Orthodox apologists I've seen, he actually attempts to go into scripture and deal with scripture a lot of the time. Now, when it comes to like icons, I think he's doing a terrible job there at addressing things, but you know, that's like any Eastern Orthodox with icon veneration, because they're all like, oh, it goes back to the fathers, and then like I've heard every argument on I'm not going to go on a tangent on icon veneration, but I've heard a lot. If you want to know about Eastern Orthodox and icon veneration, Seraphim Hamilton has like 18 videos on it. You can go find those there. That's probably only a slight exaggeration with how many he's done.
A lot of time argument is basically just I mean, I'm not an iconoclast, but
yep.
a lot of times there's a distinction between
neither am I
accepting the fact that icons exist and you can have them and own them and that they're cool. Like, I don't have an issue with like a grandma kissing a cross or whatever.
Yeah.
But when it's mandatory, that becomes an issue. And
yes.
The requirement for proving it is not satisfied simply by showing that an image existed, right?
Yeah.
So that would be like me trying to debate a cult that I don't know, worships pictures of a brown dog with a spot on it, and then I go back and I say, well, look, a picture with a brown dog with a spot on it existed in 0 AD or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like 99% of Seraphim's arguments, in my experiences. Images, therefore veneration. But that debate will probably never end. I do have a bit list. As far as people who do debates, Gavin Ortland is the one I have down as well. I do like you. I'm sure you know Javier Perdomo, though he's not in the debate sphere. Neither am I. We both make videos in the apologetic sphere. I might get in debates in 2026. We'll depending on my school schedule. Anyone who doesn't know what I do, I'm a full-time student. I work full-time, and then I'm in volunteer ministry close to full-time, and I'm actually about to take on more. I'll be going into some local prisons, so time is not in abundance. Yeah, I'm excited and intimidated, but it's where the Lord called me, so I'm going to go.
Praise God.
On the Roman Catholic side, I don't actually know if he's done debates. I think he has. It's Eric Ybarra. I actually really like Eric Ybarra. Not because I'm necessarily convinced by the arguments, but unlike a lot of people, I do think he is being honest all the time, and he is attempting to engage the arguments. Now, I know on like Sola Fide and stuff, there was a time I remember him talking with Jordan Cooper. It was sort of like a dialogue debate where he didn't seem to understand the difference between the historic position from like the Council of Trent on justification and how different that is than the Protestant position. So I'm sure you've heard like Jimmy Atkin be like, oh, there is no anathema on Sola Fide and there is no real difference on justification. I don't know if you've heard his spiel on that.
Jimmy Akin is I think is somebody who I feel like there's something off about the way that, like, I don't want to accuse him of being dishonest, but it's almost like there is some kind of intellectual disconnect between the topics, typically when he's debating somebody.
I tell people he has had the Vatican II sauce and he is lost in it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't want to speak poorly about him, but there is something uncanny about those dialogues. Yeah. It's like, okay, so premise 1 is here. He's on like premise 3. And then when the person gets back to premise 1, he just pretends like the person actually means premise 3. And it's just,
it's weird.
Like he's having a conversation with himself with another person present. I don't know if that makes sense.
Maybe that is what's happening.
Yeah.
Either way. This guy doesn't do debates, but I just enjoyed listening to him. He's very staunchly Roman Catholic. So if you're wanting someone who's like not staunchly Roman Catholic, you're not going to find this. His YouTube channel is called Catholic OCD Podcast. So he doesn't do debates, but he does, comment and stuff like that. And I think he's just sort of in that same vein as Eric Ybarra. He's being honest. He is trying to be charitable towards both sides. And he's been open. Like, there was a time he read Luther's 95 Theses and was like, oh, Luther's got like a bunch of super solid points, and a bunch of these are right. And I don't know, I remember talking about purgatory being a big problem for him, and like, why doesn't the Pope just let everybody out of purgatory? I think he accepted the answer Eric Ybarra has on purgatory, if you're familiar with that. I don't remember the nuances off the top of my head.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah. It was related to like suffering being important and temporal versus eternal. I can't remember all the exact distinctions because purgatory is not my cup of tea. I see it as a bunch of nonsense. But
I think, I mean, if that really is his argument, I think that's a bunch of cope, because if you can sell an indulgence that will get somebody out of purgatory. So you're saying that the money that you use to build the the basilicas and stuff like that is of greater importance than the suffering that's oh so important that the Pope just can't let everybody out of purgatory for. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'll find the videos for that after the fact, and so everyone can go check that out and fact check that. But from memory, that's what it was. That's sort of my list. I do agree with Trent Horn. I certainly don't agree with him on everything, and I do kind of get tired of the whole like. And I mean, at least he's been open and honest. Like, he is specifically targeting a specific branch of the Protestant umbrella, but he does also regularly be like Protestants and then lump everyone into one group. And I'm just like, Methodists aren't all one group. Baptist, Lutheran, we're all different groups. But he is honest about it. He's not trying to hide it. So props for that.
Yeah, I think when he does his debates, though, he's relatively charitable. So
yeah, his debates are great.
I would put him probably as one of the top guys in the Roman Catholic sphere for that particular reason. He is charitable, but he still does his debates with like intellectual integrity. Yeah. I don't judge somebody based off of the shorts they post or maybe what their thumbnail or title has to say about a topic, but the content of what they're actually putting forth. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, that is a good motto to have.
Because the rest of it's just SEO. It's just search engine optimization at that point. What are you going to put in your thumbnail or title? Like argument for, but not Lutherans, not you know.
Yeah.
It's not you know.
Yeah, I get it on like the thumbnail and the search engine game. That I absolutely, if you're on YouTube, you got to at least attempt to somewhat play the YouTube game if you want to like actually be popular. But now I lost my train of thought. But unless you have if anyone has questions, feel free to start putting them in the chat. Go ahead.
I was going to say, see, that's a good debate tactic. You throw them off, start talking about something else.
Maybe
that's what you have to do before you start getting into debates. You have to let me scream at you for like an hour, and then you'll be desensitized to it.
We can hop in a call some other time and you can just start blasting into my
ears.
Do
a live stream. Live. Yeah, that's.
But I think that's everything I had written down. I know there was one question earlier, way up at the top. Let me go find it. They put it in all caps. You think it'd be easy to see if it weren't for my old man eyes. What's your thoughts on Eastern churches when they say they are the original church Jesus started, the ark of salvation on earth?
What are my thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'm guessing that's to both of us. I'm happy to let you go first on all these questions. You're the guest here.
Sure. So, you make the one true church claim, right? I mean, I would say as you look throughout the history of the entire church and the writings of the church fathers, when they're talking about the church being preserved, it's typically not within the individual institution. You do have citations within the early church that talk about the unity of the church being found within a particular institution, but that's understandable if you get into the mindset of what they're arguing against. So you look at like Ignatius, let's say we're going to use against heresies or something, right? Let's just set Ignatius aside. We're gonna look at against heresies, look at the context of the writing. So you're writing against specific heretic groups, and he's using the unity of the church found in a visible institution as an argument against this heretical sect. Right? That works in the early church. But if I were to take him and transplant him today, and I were to say, look, the head of the church is a manifest heretic that tells you that all pathways to God, all religions are pathways to God. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian. That he's going to say, I'm not in communion with that guy. I'm going to see who's teaching the truth. I'm going to be in communion with them. Right? Like, they have become apostate. So when you look at the Eastern Orthodox Church, at least the modern, there's some more rigorous sects that might not hold the views of what I'm about to tell you, but Go Arch, anybody under the Ecumenical Patriarchate, anybody under the MP, they all say the same type of stuff, but they'll basically say something along the lines of what I just said. Archbishop Elpidophoros has made a very explicit statement. He's the head of Go Arch in America. And he has said basically all religions lead to God, kind of this syncretistic nonsense. The Bartholomew has said the same exact thing. I actually have notes with a citation that he made that I'll go ahead and I'll just read right here. If I were to take him and transplant any church father from the early church and bring them today and say, like, hey, is this the one true church? They'd say, no, that's apostate. Don't be in communion with them. Those are apostates. Those are heretics. Don't be in communion with them. It would say you need to cleave to what we taught, 1800, 1700 years ago, not to what these guys are teaching today. So let me read this here. So this is E.P. Bartholomew. He says, we're all created by God, and as such, we're all brothers and sisters. We have the same heavenly Father, whatever we call him. He's then interrupted, and he says, and somebody asks him a question, all religions have the same heavenly Father? The patriarch replies, of course. God is but one, independently of the name we give him, Allah or Yahweh, and so on. God is one, and we're all his children. Archbishop Elpidophoros says, when you elevate one religion above all others, it's as if you decide there's only one path leading to the top of the mountain. But the truth is, you simply cannot see the myriad of paths that lead to the same destination. Talking about other false religions. So if you take the early church, the same guys that make these statements about the unity of the church being found in one institution to refute heretics because it's so early on, take them today, they wouldn't be in communion with the EP, MP, or the Roman Catholic Church. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah. And that's not even touching on, I know you've touched on Bartholomew. I mean, it wasn't Bartholomew, it was someone else. An Eastern Orthodox, big head, but Rome, we see it, the German bishops, we see it with tons of people on like the alphabet stuff, try and avoid YouTube censorship here.
Oh, yeah.
And just like that's getting more and more rampant. And I have this conversation with a lot of my own friends and people I know in real life where I'm like, Muslims don't worship the same God. I will just quote a quick scripture to like, if you want to argue with me, you can argue with John the Apostle here. This is 1 John 2:22. Who is the liar but the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, the one who denies the Father and the Son. And if you read the first half of, just the Gospel of John, but even just the first chapter of John, Jesus is called nothing short of the light, the eternal life, the way to life, the truth. He wasn't just a man. You can't get away with that.
Yeah, I don't know how Roman Catholics get away with splitting.
I don't know.
Splitting his natures. You know what I mean? Because that's basically what you're doing. Well, they deny his divinity, but they accept him as a prophet. But they have the same God as you. You're basically you're an historian. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know how they get away with it. It's the Vatican II sauce. It's strong stuff. I'm telling you. Someone asked, "What is your epistemic foundation for the canon?"
I would have to give away my deck of cards for my upcoming debate.
That's fair. Hold on to that.
Yeah, wait and watch the debate on the 30th. Check out on my channel in the live tab. I'm going to be debating Cameron Riker on that exact question. I don't think he's going to be watching my videos to see what my arguments are for it, but just in case he is, I don't want to show my cards before the debate.
Yeah, I do not blame you on that. For my own stance, for me, tradition. It's fine for me, and I have a video on my channel. I think it's just called "A Methodist Approach to the Canon Problem," but it's in I think I have a playlist called The Canon. You'll find it in there. But, I know some people don't like that answer, but sola scriptura isn't no tradition.
Correct.
So I'm fine. I'm fine taking it. It's not a problem for me. Someone else asked, what are your thoughts or wisdom on people who RC Oreo who flat out deny any proof against their tradition? I understand all humans do this, but it seems like especially converts, this is true.
What is my advice towards who? For those people or for you dealing?
Yeah, Raisin, feel free to clarify that question, but I believe it's, what are your thoughts or like wisdom and advice on how to deal with people who just won't accept proof against their tradition?
Well, you're not, I mean, if you're in a debate, they're never going to accept that within the same conversation. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm going to have a conversation with, I mean, it happens sometimes, very rarely, but have a conversation with a Muslim and I show him all of the proof of Jesus's followers calling him God within the first 3 centuries, right? And he's been taught, oh, they're all Muslims. Like all of this has been like, oh, it's just the Bible that's corrupt. So you have to tell me that history is corrupt as well, like all of it. And having that discussion, I've never had one in the middle of that discussion say, oh, I'm a Christian now. It's amazing. Like that's not how it works. Typically, what you're doing is you're putting a pebble in their shoe. They're going home. They're thinking about it. And then over time, their opinion changes because we're prideful and sinful people. But that's really the intent and focus if you're having a one-on-one discussion with that person. Now, again, I'll go back to the example of when I was talking to my sister's husband. That discussion did not convert him right then and there. It converted my sister, who was listening to the discussion, not in that moment, but later. And then later on through that conversion, he then was converted. So it's not that you, and it's not really me, that's the Holy Spirit doing it, but the pebble is in the shoe and then they go and they think about it later. That's typically how it works. It's not like I know we're so used to like instant gratification, but a lot of this is nothing to do with that. The same thing with evangelization. I run a street evangelism ministry with my church. We're not out there with signs saying turn or burn, but we go to the park and we'll talk to people during events. We'll say, hey, we're here with a local church. Anything we can pray for you for, that kind of thing. And then we give them the gospel. And it's very, casual. We're not like, being mean to anybody, but sometimes you don't get that message right then and there that they are, oh, I've accepted Jesus because you told me right now. Usually it's when they go home and then it's like, okay, man, that guy gave me a card, didn't he? It's like, or like, okay, no, you talked to me in the park and I started to think about what you had to say. And I think you're actually right. I want to find out more about Jesus. So I'm here at the church. I've had that happen before. I've had some people accept him right then and there, but typically it's the latter.
Yeah. We got it. I don't even know where I put myself, and that shows how much I use it. We got to get past the like TikTok phase, dopamine hits, and small. We got to really work on moving past that. At least in our American context. I don't know how it is. I'm sure most places that have cell phones and TikTok have the same problem. But yeah, instant gratification is a big issue for us. Rexalon's asking, can Pastor Ben share some citations from early churchmen that show Mary wasn't sinless? I only know one from Chrysostom Homily 44. Yeah.
This might take some time, but there's a lot. So basically, I mean, everybody in the first 3 sentences. So I'll just give up. I'll go through a couple of them. I'm not going to do all of them, but I'll read just a couple citations and then we'll move on. Otherwise, I'll be here all day. So let's see. One thing not to get gaslit about. There's a very common article that's shared from Catholic Answers in which they point to a typology that was not present within the early church. You've probably, not present in the way that they try to make it sound like. They've taken something where it's like a comparison between two people and they've imputed a third meaning to it. So it's like, I compare two people. I'll give you an example. So I'm just going to make one up. This is completely false. Don't believe what I say right here. And then I'll get into the citations, but I want to teach you something. So let's say, okay, Abraham and Moses both had covenants. Okay, that's true. They both had covenants with God. Okay, but that means Abraham and Moses both had covenants with God. Therefore, they are one being. Okay, that's the typology. Okay, that's my made up typology that I just made up in my head right now. So you've got, it's basically two truths and a lie. You add a comparison between two people, and then you impute your third kind of implied meaning into text. It's a way to reinterpret prior texts to give them meaning that they don't have. They do that with the New Eve typology for early church citations, and they will use that to try to tell you that Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and other figures believed that Mary was sinless when they merely make comparisons of obedience and disobedience within the text. For instance, I've done talks on this, not on YouTube, but outside. I might have actually mentioned this on YouTube. But if you look at what Justin Martyr writes in against or in his dialogue to Trypho, it doesn't say Mary is sinless. This is what it says. It says, as Eve was disobedient, Mary was obedient through the birth of Christ, and sin was destroyed. It does not say that as Eve was sinful, Mary was sinless. They hype you up with this like kind of prelude of knowledge, and then when you hear the words Mary and Eve in those texts, you're like, oh, I draw the connection. That'd be like if I were to gaslight you and say like, this is a lie, obviously. Please don't clip me on this, because this is what I'm going to say. I'm making this up. Okay. Moses and Abraham both had covenants with God. Therefore, they are one being, right? The entire earth taught this. They were one being. This is your modern understanding that shows that you don't understand they're one being. I'm going to read to you from Irenaeus, and he's going to talk about both of them right here. And he affirms that they are one being. And it's like, just as Abraham had a covenant with God, Moses had a covenant and things were fulfilled. See, they're one being. Don't you understand that? Don't get gaslit by that. So taking that aside, there are no early citations from the first 3 centuries other than Subtuum Praesidium, which most scholars date later, that will show at least the Immaculate Conception. She was born without original sin. So let me get into some citations. So Fulgentius of Rus says this. He says, and to be sure, the flesh of Mary had been conceived in iniquity in accordance with human practice. And so her flesh, that gave birth to the Son of God in the likeness of sinful flesh, was indeed sinful. For the apostle bears witness that God sent his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh. All right. John Chrysostom says that she acted in vanity. He says this about the wedding at Cana. And this he said, not being ashamed of his mother, nor did not bear him. For if he had been ashamed of her, he would not have passed through that womb. But as declaring that she had no advantage from this, unless she do all that is required to be done. For in fact, that what she had essayed to do was of superfluous vanity, in that she wanted to show the people she had power and authority over her son, imagining not yet anything great about him. So Chrysostom said she acted in vanity. There is a chain of citations from the 2nd century that actually goes onward about the Passion, and saying that the prophecy of the sword will pierce your heart, right, was talking about Mary falling into doubt about Jesus's divinity at the Passion, that, oh, maybe it was a lie because he died. So there are early church citations, not all of them from church fathers, but most of them that are church fathers cite from this earlier source. The earliest one that I know that says this was Origen, but Cyril of Alexandria, several others after that actually cite this from Origen as if it was authoritative, as if it was the actual view. So you can't just discard the text just because Origen was a little bit of a heretic. You know what I mean? Which I was. I'm not an Origenist, or which he was. So I'm not an Origenist. So let me read to you this. What ought we to think that while the apostles were scandalized, the mother of the Lord was immune to scandal? If she had not experienced scandal during the Lord's passion, Jesus did not die for her sins. That's pretty clear. And then here is Cyril of Alexandria citing Origen. I know this is the last one I'll read because this is a lot. For it was his purpose to teach even this, that probably even the mother of the Lord herself was scandalized at the unexpected passion, and that the death upon the cross, being so very bitter, was near unsettling her from her fitting mind. And in addition to this, the mockeries of the Jews, the soldiers too, perhaps, who were sitting near the cross and making a jest of him who was hanging on it, and daring in the sight of his very mother the division of his garments. Doubt not that she admitted some such thoughts as these. And here's the citations. I bore him who is laughed at on the wood, but in saying he was the true son of the omnipotent God, perhaps somehow he was mistaken. He said he was the life. How then has he been crucified? How has he been strangled by the cords of his murderers? How prevailed he not over the plot of his persecutors? Why does he not descend from the cross? So a couple, I mean, very dark there. And I don't blame her for having those kind of thoughts. I mean, it's an awful thing to have to witness. So I don't want to seem like I'm imputing blame onto her. But if you are, as the early church states pretty clearly here, if you fall into a state of unbelief, would you not consider that to be a sin? I mean, I would absolutely consider it to be a sin. But there's several citations like that. I have a whole big fat list of church father citations to talk about her having either sinned implicitly or having original sin. You do start to see a change in this type of language around the 4th century. Ephraim the Syrian, probably one of the earlier church fathers that say something akin to she was spotless, right? But even he says that Christ was born out of a nature that was subjected to impurity. He says something along the lines of, just as pearls are born from unclean animals, so also is Christ born out of a nature that had been subjected to impurity and needed to be cleansed by God's visitation, right? And then he compares it to the cleansing of the place of birth, pangs, and curses prior to Christ's conception, not his own. So that's, you see early citations of pre-purification is different than the Immaculate.
Yep. I do have something I want to say on that. But first, yep. when you talked about that being a made-up argument, I have done a lot of debates with Gnostics, and I have heard that argument, maybe not with Moses and Abraham, but like Jesus and David are the same person and stuff like that. And they mean it as in the same person. And I'm like, oh, come on. I don't know how I attracted a bunch of Gnostics on some of my videos, but they just like kept coming.
Oh, man. You got to on your hashtags.
Oh, come on.
Hashtag esoteric, hashtag, you know, give me your.
Yeah, but I do know on doubt, you know, there's times like I read constantly reading the Gospels. It's like, how could the disciples and the apostles miss that the cross was coming? It's so obvious. He says it again and again and again. And then it kind of clicked for me today. I was going through Daniel 6:10. I don't remember where it is in there, where it's giving the vision of like the pillar that will reach up into the host of heavens and, you know, take the sacrifices away and take the crown away from the prince. You're like, wait, God, that can't happen. Who's going to reach into your host? Surely your worship won't be stopped. Surely people will continue to worship and offer sacrifices. Surely no one can take the crown from the host. This couldn't happen. I was like, oh, now I get it. Like there's this like level of, you just can't accept that something so horrific would actually come to pass before you. And then it does. And you have no choice but to accept it. But that was kind of a moment I had earlier this morning that just kind of clicked that in my head for me of like, oh, that's how they could refuse to accept it, because they didn't want to the entire time. That's all it was. At least,
yeah,
I mean, initial inklings.
I think a lot of people that I speak to, especially new Christians, when they talk about, I don't know, they read the Old Testament for the first time or the New Testament, or they read the book of Acts and they see all of these miracles, and they're like, well, you know, I wouldn't have such a hard time believing at every moment if I had seen a miracle like they had. Well, you know, we see them every day. It's just it's not documented in hindsight like it is in the scripture.
Yeah.
I tell this story a lot, or I give this illustration and then I tell a story, but let me give you the illustration first. Somebody could pray to God for a sign, and then later that week, a fireball from heaven crash in front of them. They could write it off as a meteorite or something, right? If you if you look and it's like documented after the fact, and it's like, and God caused the fire from heaven to strike in front of him, and you're like, oh, I would believe that, you know. It's like, no, but if you're not willing to accept what he's trying to show you, it doesn't ultimately matter. You can write anything off. I had I do jujitsu, I do like some combat sports, and I blew out my ACL. I was in a lockdown position, and it popped so loud.
Yeah.
The entire gym heard it. I couldn't walk. I had to be in a wheelchair. I got rushed to the emergency room, and the guy who had been a doctor for decades, he's moving it, and my like lower part of my leg is like moving past my knees. Like, yeah, it shouldn't be able to do that. I was like in an exquisite amount of pain. It was like horrible. He says, yep, I'm gonna schedule you to get a CAT scan. You're gonna go get prepped for surgery. The recovery time 6 months, which is, I mean, that's awful news to hear for somebody who's, you know, physically active and likes to do that kind of a sport. I go to church, they pray over me, they pray over my leg. I go and I get the scan done, and the doctor says, when I get the results back, he says, there's nothing wrong with your leg. You can go back to the sport in like a week as soon as the swelling's gone. That's a miracle. That's a miracle. I could write that off as like oh, well, maybe there was nothing, you know, but the entire gym heard the pop. I literally could not walk. I was in a wheelchair. It was some of the most exquisite pain I've ever been in. And this is coming from a guy who's had cancer and had to have extensive like surgeries, things like that. I mean, probably some of the most pain I've ever been in was this ACL injury. But I mean, I could have just wrote that off. I think when new Christians read in the Old Testament, the New Testament, they're like, if God would just do a miracle for me, I would believe. It's like, no, you wouldn't, man. Not if you're not in the right frame of mind. Yeah. You have faith first. It's just a sign of authority is all it is.
Yeah, I can sort of speak to that. So I wasn't a believer until I was 14. I mean, as a kid, I must have been like 5, 6, 7. I don't know what it was. I had an out of body or near death experience. You know, a lot of people talk about like they see heaven, right? That's not my experience. I've learned recently I'm not the only one who's had this. They call it that near hell experience, where it was not a good experience when I went through this side. And I didn't acknowledge what that was. I sort of had this like nihilistic, there's no point in creation. Good and evil is just man's made up imagination of things. I was a weird kid. So take that into account here. Like these are the kinds of things I was thinking as a kid. It's like, oh, this is all just made up. There's no point. And later in life, it took me years when I look back on it, at some point I was like, oh, that was real. That wasn't just an hallucination. That was like evil in front of me. And I saw hell and heard it. Well, I didn't see it. I heard it. And it took years before I was willing to accept it. And it's all because something had happened to shake up my view of reality. You know, you're exactly right. You have to be in a mindset to accept it, or you will find excuses. We're prideful creatures. So we may think one thing, but it's not always necessarily the case. I've got a few minutes here, and I see a few questions we can try and get through if you have time.
I got like 15 more minutes, if that's cool.
Yeah, I got 10, so that's perfect. This is from Angel Deniv. He says, an EO once quoted Palamas to me. This should be a pretty quick one. Experience comes before knowledge. Therefore, you need to be orthodox in order to interpret the Bible. How do I dismantle this fallacious epistemology?
By laughing. I
was thinking.
Experience comes before knowledge. I mean, I don't necessarily think that's biblical. I mean, you can look at where faith come from. Faith comes from hearing. What is that? That's knowledge. That's a knowledge of the truth, right? Yeah, you might need to come and see, but that doesn't necessarily apply to testing the weight of truth claims. See, that's kind of the issue when you debate Eastern Orthodox. A lot of them really do not have the receipts for why they believe what they believe. It's just something a priest told them. So you're ultimately just fighting against someone's opinion. So I think we need to get better as Protestants is not accepting that as an answer and asking them for the receipts. What is binding in your belief? Oh, it's just what my priest says. It's just what my bishop says. Okay, well then what if Bishop B says it's okay for you to be Skittles, you know? What if Bishop C says, oh, well, it's okay for you to steal from people because they're Roman Catholics? Well, yeah, you could say, well, the other bishop could, you know, take some kind of action against them, that's fine. But if you're under their jurisdiction, right, what is to prevent you from really showing them that goes against whatever epistemic foundation you have for that belief system? Show me the receipts that you're arguing from in which you would even be able to say that that's wrong. Otherwise, it's all subjective. Does that make sense? Yep. You just use the tag argument for their particular worldview. It's not only useful for atheists, it's useful for any worldview. Show me why you believe what you believe. Show me where it's documented. And if it's not documented, then it's subjective. You don't have anything to base it off of. Oh, it's whatever the bishop. Okay, the bishop could say that, green aliens created my dog. That doesn't make it right. Show me where your epistemic foundation is.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Thank you. I can only think of the Bereans. How did they know before they became a Christian? I finally figured out, I think, how to show comments that shows how out of date with technology I am. This is super quick. Someone did wonder, did you grow up in a non-denominational church?
No, I grew up in the all right. So at one point in my life, I was in a non-denominational church when I was younger, but when I was very young, we were in the COC for a very short period of time. And then they were kind of, I don't want to say anything bad, but they were kind of wacko. So we left that and we went into another small Southern non-denominational church. So yes. But I've also been to when I was younger, kind of Baptist churches and things like that. For me though, as a non-denominational Christian serving at a non-denominational church, I'm not a Baptist. I have different views on the sacraments. So if you are a Baptist, you will probably disagree with me. I do believe in the real presence. I do believe in baptismal regeneration. So I'm kind of a odd case for non-denominationalism.
Yeah, you've got the right views. It's okay to say it. But I think that is probably a good spot to wrap it up. There were some more questions, but we can, you all can ask those in either Cleave's live stream and Ben's live stream. Go watch his live streams and stuff. Go watch his debates. He does great stuff. And you can always ask me on my own channel. If you're in SSBS, you can ask me there. But if you would do us the honor of praying us out, and I think that's a great way to end it.
Heavenly Father, God, have mercy on us. Christ, have mercy on us. Lord, have mercy on us. God, we seek you. We seek your truth, Lord. God, help us to remain humble in our interactions with people from other traditions, God. Help us to keep you the focus of all of our conversations. Don't allow us to slip into this kind of rhetoric pitfall in which we are compromising on our morals to win intellectual points. God, I pray that you sanctify us and guide us closer to you. It is in Jesus' holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us here today. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Everyone, God bless.
God bless.